I was just an ordinary man who made marriage my entire world, yet my wife treated me like a routine attachment she could sign off on at her convenience. Even when I was hospitalized and bleeding, her first instinct upon answering the phone wasn't to rush to my side, but to hang up and continue entertaining Joey Reynolds, that supposedly emotionally stable man she kept around. When a doctor needed a family member's signature, I was forced to use my left hand to scribble Miriam's name in the emergency contact column. When I finally woke up, all I saw was a phone screen that had been silent the entire night, looking as though it had completely shut down. It was only after I deleted her as my emergency contact and moved out of the house she had bought in Chicago before our wedding that she finally started to panic. She followed me to my hotel, to my office, and even out into the rain, repeatedly asking if I was just throwing a tantrum or if I was trying to run away from her. I used to believe I would always be standing right behind her, waiting for her to finish her work and turn around. Now, as I lay in this hospital bed, I simply told her that I didn't have any family. That was the moment she finally realized that the family member who was always waiting for her was no longer there. It was all because the very second she hung up the phone that night, I finally woke up from the dream of this marriage. "You're in the hospital," she said, her voice freezing. "Why didn't you contact me?" Her tone was ice cold, sounding like she was interrogating a subordinate who had abandoned their post without permission. I lay there in the hospital bed, lacking even the strength to lift my eyes and look at her. I asked her if she would have even come if I had told her. She was silent for a brief moment. "Well, I'm here now, aren't I?" she replied. I let out a faint smile while the doctor frowned as he flipped through my medical records. He told me that my shoulder injury was quite serious and that it would be best for me to remain hospitalized for observation. "There is no need for that," I said. I looked up at her, my voice perfectly calm. "I don't have any family," I told her. "If I were to actually die, there wouldn't be anyone waiting to be notified anyway." The private hospital suite was eerily silent. It was so quiet that the sound of the fluid dripping was unmistakable. Each drop fell with a rhythmic thud. The cream-colored curtains looked expensive, and they glided silently when moved. The air was a mix of antiseptic and a faint floral scent. The nurses replaced the flowers every day, claiming they helped stabilize the patient's moods. But I didn't have any emotions left that needed healing. I just lay there, staring blankly at the ceiling. My left shoulder was wrapped in thick bandages, and the slightest movement sent a sharp, piercing pain deep into the bone. The doctor told me I was lucky to be alive. If the impact had been at a slightly different angle, I wouldn't have gotten off with just a hospital stay. When the door to the room opened, I didn't even bother to turn my head. The footsteps were light but unmistakable. The clicking of high heels on the floor was excessively steady, as if she were intentionally slowing her pace. She clearly didn't want to seem like she was in any rush. I didn't need to look to know who it was. It was Miriam Sullivan, my wife. She paused at the doorway for a moment, not approaching the bed immediately. Her reflection was visible in the window glass. She stood perfectly straight with her back held stiffly, looking as if she had just walked out a high-stakes board meeting. She was wearing a perfectly tailored designer suit in a clean, sharp neutral tone. An exquisite brooch was pinned to her lapel. I didn't recognize the brand, but it was obviously expensive. Her makeup was meticulous, with her eyeliner applied in a single, sharp stroke without a single flaw. She had always been this way. In our 3 years of marriage, she had never let me see her in a state of disarray. "Edward," she said. She called my name in a steady voice that betrayed no emotion. I didn't answer. She took a few steps forward and stood by the bed, looking down at me. The look in her eyes reminded me of a piece of merchandise being returned to a store. It wasn't anger, but a cold evaluation, as if she were trying to identify a defect. "You're in the hospital. Why didn't you contact me?" she asked smoothly. It sounded like she was just completing a mandatory step in a corporate checklist. I still refused to look at her. I simply reached out and pressed the call button next to the bed. A nurse arrived quickly. "Could you please call my attending physician for me?" I asked her. Miriam was visibly taken aback, her brow furrowing slightly. The doctor arrived shortly after, giving me a quick examination before carefully reviewing my medical records. "Sir, given your current condition, it isn't advisable for you to be discharged yet," the doctor said. "You should stay for observation for at least a few more days." I looked at him and said, "I'm leaving now." The doctor hesitated and instinctively glanced at Miriam. She just stood there with her hands at her sides, offering no comment or support, almost as if she were waiting for me to provide a justification. She seemed to be waiting for an explanation, but I had no intention of giving her one. "But your injuries," the doctor began, trying to protest. I cut him off. "I have no family," I said calmly. "If something happens to me, there is no one who needs to be notified." The room went silent for several seconds after I said that. Miriam's expression finally shifted. It wasn't guilt or worry, but a certain stiffness, as if I had personally offended her. She looked as though I had just insulted her. She clearly hadn't expected me to say something like that, especially not in front of a stranger. "Edward," she she said, her voice dropping. Is there any point in saying things like that now? Only then did I turn my head to look at her. She had beautiful eyes, clear and sharp, possessing the kind of confidence that only comes to those accustomed to holding power. I had been captivated by those eyes the first time I met her. At the time, she had just been appointed as the vice president of her company, standing at the front of the boardroom with everyone's eyes on her, mine included. Looking at her now, however, she felt like a total stranger. I'm just stating facts, I said. The doctor stood there awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable, but he followed protocol and handed me the discharge papers. I took the pen and signed every page. My movements were slow, but I never hesitated. Miriam stood by my side, remaining silent. I could feel her eyes on my hand as I held the pen, watching me write the name that appeared on our marriage certificate. It was a name she had signed on countless legal documents over the years, yet she had rarely ever truly looked at it. After I finished the last page, I handed the pen back. That's it, the doctor said with a nod. He gave me a few instructions for my recovery and then left the room. As soon as the door closed, the tension in the room spiked. What exactly are you trying to do? She finally spoke, her voice laced with obvious irritation. You get hurt and don't tell me, and then you say those things in front of a stranger. Are you trying to embarrass me on purpose? I leaned back against the pillow. A dull ache throbbed in my shoulder, spreading outward in waves. I'm not making trouble, I said. I just didn't see the point. No point. She let out a cold laugh. I'm your wife. I nodded and replied, legally speaking, yes. Her breath hitched. Miriam Sullivan was the head of a major corporation, used to being the center of everyone's world and keeping everything under her absolute control. To her, marriage was more like a completed task than a relationship that required effort. I had always known this, but in the past, I had been willing to wait. When did this happen? She asked. 3 months ago, I replied. She froze. 3 months. I didn't offer any further explanation. During those 3 months, she was busy with acquisitions, fundraising, and corporate dinners. She was also busy with that man, Joey Reynolds. Joey was the head of marketing and relatively young. He was soft-spoken and a good listener. Whenever she mentioned him, she would praise his attention to detail and his emotional stability, calling him a rare and excellent partner. She never saw anything wrong with their dynamic, and I never bothered to point it out. Then why are you only telling me this now? Her tone finally shifted slightly. Because you're only just now showing up, I said. She opened her mouth, but found no words. The only sound in the room was the low hum of the medical monitors. I pulled back the covers and got out of bed to pack my things. There wasn't much to pack anyway, just a few changes of clothes and my phone. Miriam stood there watching me, as if she were finally realizing that I was actually leaving. Where are you going? She asked. I'm not going home, I replied. Edward, she said, her voice softer than before as she tried to stop me. Let's just go home and talk this through. I opened the door with my back to her. There's nothing left to talk about. As the door clicked shut, I could tell she was still standing there, not following me. The hallway lights were blindingly bright as I walked away, one step at a time. The pain in my shoulder was sharp and undeniably real. Behind me, Miriam Sullivan remained standing at the door of that expensive private room. For the first time, she truly realized that some things were no longer within her control. Everything that had happened that day had started on a perfectly ordinary night in Chicago. I was supposed to just meet a client in an old industrial district on the south side. The area had recently been cleared for demolition, and several of the streetlights were out. The pavement was uneven and full of potholes. My client had moved our meeting time at the last minute, forcing me to wait for 20 minutes. It was during those 20 minutes that everything went wrong. Someone slammed into me from behind. I instinctively reached out to steady myself, and my shoulder crashed violently against a metal guardrail. The sharp edge of the metal tore into my flesh. The sound it made was a dull thud, less like an impact and more like the sound of bone being forcibly crushed. The moment I hit the ground, my first thought wasn't about the pain. It was about my phone, which had slid out of my pocket. The screen was still glowing. I crawled over to pick it up, my hands shaking uncontrollably. The first thing I did was call Miriam. After getting hurt, she was the only person I could think of. The phone rang for a long time, so long that I started to wonder if I had dialed the wrong number. Just as I was about to hang up and try again, she picked up. It was noisy on her end, with music and people talking in the background. What is it? Her voice came through the receiver, sharp and professional. I've had an accident, I said, leaning my weight against the guardrail. My shoulder was already going numb. I think I need you to come here. She was silent for a moment. I heard that split-second hesitation very clearly. I can't get away right now, she said. I didn't ask what she was busy with. Is it serious? She asked. I glanced down at my shoulder. Blood had already soaked through a large patch of my shirt. I probably need to go to the hospital, I told her. Someone on her end was calling her name, and they sounded very close. Handle it yourself for now, she said. I can't leave yet. I opened my mouth to say her name, but before I could finish, the screen went black. She had hung up. I stared at the phone for a few seconds before the reality sank in. She really wasn't coming. I sat there alone for a long time before before I finally called 911. While in the ambulance, I sent her another message with just a few words telling her I was at the hospital. She never replied. Once I reached the hospital, there were endless forms to sign. The nurse asked where my family was. I hesitated for a moment before saying that they hadn't arrived yet. She gave me a look but didn't press the issue, just handed me the pen. I signed with my left hand, my handwriting so messy I could barely recognize my own name. There was a long line at the billing window. I just stood there as blood dripped from my sleeve onto the floor. I didn't even notice until a kind stranger pointed it out to me. Throughout the entire process, my phone remained silent. Before the surgery, the doctor asked if I had any allergies to medication, and I shook my head. Then he asked for an emergency contact. I gave him Miriam's phone number. He nodded and said they would notify her once there was an update. As I lay on the operating table watching the surgical lights flicker on, a different memory surfaced. That morning, before leaving for work, she had been in the walk-in closet trying on clothes while Joey Reynolds stood nearby, handing her a blazer. They were standing very close, whispering about something. When she saw me, her expression was perfectly natural. She just mentioned that she had a business dinner and might be home late. I had just nodded at the time. I only found out later that Joey had arranged that dinner for her. Joey Reynolds, the head of marketing, was capable and charming. Every time Miriam talked about him, she always made sure to mention how emotionally stable he was. She admired that quality in people. By the time the surgery was over, it was late at night. The doctor told me that while no bones were broken, the ligament damage was severe and would require a long recovery. I was wheeled back to my room. The nurse plugged my phone in charge. As the screen lit up, I instinctively checked it. There were no missed calls and no new messages. I woke up very early the next morning. It was just dawn outside, with heavy gray clouds hanging low over the city. My phone finally vibrated. It was a text from Miriam. "Something came up last night, and I missed your call. How are you doing?" she wrote. I stared at that single line of text for a long time, my finger hovering over the screen. After a long delay, I replied with just 4 words, "I'm at the hospital." She never responded. Around noon, Joey Reynolds called. His voice was as gentle and concerned as ever. "Miriam mentioned you got hurt. How are you feeling?" he asked. I was a bit surprised. "How did you know?" I questioned. "She mentioned it last night," he said. "I wanted to come by earlier, but I've been buried in meetings all day." I didn't say anything. He continued, "Don't overthink it. She's been under a lot of pressure lately." I had heard that excuse more than once before. The day before I was scheduled to be discharged, the doctor suggested I stay for 2 more days of observation. I refused for a very simple reason. There was no one waiting for me at home. While I was packing my things, I opened the emergency contacts on my phone. Miriam's name was at the very top of the list. I stared at it for a few seconds before reaching out and hitting delete. When a confirmation prompt appeared, I tapped OK. In that moment, I felt no anger and no resentment. I only had one very clear realization. In her life, I didn't even have a place on the priority list. It wasn't that she didn't care about anyone. She just didn't care about me. The sunlight was blinding as I walked out of the hospital. I stood outside the hospital entrance and called an Uber for myself. My phone vibrated again with a voice message from Miriam. "Once this busy streak is over, let's sit down and talk," she said. I didn't even listen to the message. I just shoved the phone back into my pocket. The sound of the car door closing was soft, yet it felt like it was finally locking that chapter of my life away. I didn't go home the day I left the hospital. The car stopped at the gate of our complex, but after paying, I told the driver to keep going. The throbbing in my shoulder felt like a reminder not to go back to that place. I found a hotel near my office. The room was small, but it was clean enough. When the front desk asked if I wanted to list an emergency contact, I told them it wasn't necessary. It wasn't until the elevator doors closed that I realized the tension I had been holding onto was finally beginning to fade. The next day, I went to work as usual. A coworker noticed the brace on my shoulder and asked what had happened. "Just a clumsy accident," I told them. That was the end of the conversation. No one pressed for more details, and I was happy to be left alone. By the 3rd night, Miriam finally sensed that something was wrong. I worked late that day and ignored several vibrations from my phone. It wasn't until I got back to the hotel and finished my shower that I finally picked it up. There were 3 missed calls from her and a message asking why I hadn't been home for the past 2 days. I stared at the text but didn't reply immediately. It wasn't that she didn't know I had been in hospital. She just arrogantly assumed that after being discharged, I would simply go back home like I always did. She expected me to clean the house and wait for her to eventually show up. This time, however, I refused to follow the script she had written for me. She called again 30 minutes later, and I finally answered. "Where are you?" she asked without greeting. "I'm out," I replied. "What do you mean by out exactly?" Her voice was tinged with irritation. "You're injured. Why aren't you at home resting instead of running around?" I didn't offer an explanation. "I've been extremely busy these past few days and haven't had time for you," she continued. "Don't be so dramatic about it." When she said those words, I knew she still hadn't grasped the actual issue. "I'm not being dramatic," I said. There was a brief silence on her end. "Then what is this about?" she asked. "It's not about anything. I just don't feel like going back right now." She seemed to catch her breath. her voice lower than usual. Just come home. We'll talk about this in person another time. After hanging up, I set the phone aside. The following evening, just as I swiped my key card to enter my hotel room after work, I got a call from the building management at our condo. "Sir, your wife is here and says she can't get a hold of you," the manager said. I gave a brief acknowledgement and hung up. So, she had finally gone back to the apartment. She had bought that condo before we were married. It was in a prime location in the Loop, and she had overseen every detail of the renovation. By the time I moved in, everything was already perfectly in place. All I had to do was put my clothes in the closet. To her, it was our home, but I knew better. It was her house, and I was just an extra person living in it. Miriam must have realized something was wrong the second she opened the closet. I knew her habits all too well. The first thing she always did when she got home was change her clothes. Usually, she would tidy up as she went before taking a shower. Half of the closet was empty. I hadn't cleared it out entirely, but my everyday shirts and my old overcoat were gone. She probably stood in front of that closet for a long time. She didn't call me right away. Instead, she messaged Joey Reynolds to ask if he had seen me. Joey replied almost instantly, saying he hadn't seen me and asking if I hadn't come home. He suggested I might just be busy with work. That response perfectly aligned with her own perception of me. In her mind, my entire life revolved around my job. To her, being busy was the most logical and convenient explanation for everything. After her shower, she sat on the edge of the bed and tried calling me again. I didn't answer this time either. A flicker of genuine annoyance finally began to surface within her. The next afternoon, she had her assistant pull up my work schedule. The assistant hesitated while looking at the records. "Edward hasn't worked any overtime for the last 2 nights. He's been leaving right at 5. She frowned and asked where I had been going. The assistant just shook their head. For the first time, she truly realized that my whereabouts were no longer under her control. She left work early that night. The apartment was quiet, and although the lights were on, there was nobody there. She walked into the study and saw that the desk had been cleared. My favorite pen was gone, and several old files from the drawers had vanished. Those were items from projects I had finished long ago, things she had never even looked at. Standing there, she was suddenly overcome by an inexplicable sense of unease. She barely slept that night. The next day at the office, she ran into Joey Reynolds in the hall. "You don't look so good," Joey said, glancing at her. "I'm fine," she replied. He hesitated for a second before asking if it was about me. She just looked at him. "You've been so busy lately," Joey said gently. "Just give him some time." Hearing that word from someone else made her chest tighten unexpectedly. She was so used to dictating the pace of everything, only to suddenly realize that someone was drifting out of the rhythm she had established. She called me again that night. I was in the middle of organizing some files and didn't answer immediately when I saw her name on the screen. She called 3 times in a row before I finally picked up. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice tight with suppressed anger. "I'm not doing anything," I said. "You're not coming home and you're not answering your phone. If that isn't making trouble, then what is it? I'm just not living there right now." She took a deep breath. "I admit I was neglectful about your injury." This was the first time she had ever conceded anything. "Once things settle down, I'll make it up to you." I remained silent. The way she said, "make it up to you," was far too clinical, like she was dealing with a delayed corporate project. "Just come home first," she said. "We'll see," I replied. There was a silence on the other end for a few seconds. "Is there someone else?" she asked suddenly. I was taken aback for a moment, then I chuckled. "What do you think?" She didn't answer. At that moment, I could clearly feel her starting to panic. It wasn't because I had been hurt, but because things were finally moving outside the scope of her control. After hanging up, I went back to my packing. An old photo was sitting on the desk. It was our wedding picture. I looked at it for a few seconds before turning it face down and shoving it into a drawer. Miriam didn't get home until late the next night. She turned on the bedroom light to find the bed perfectly made, looking as though no one had slept in it for days. She walked into the living room and looked at the TV stand. The frame where our wedding photo used to be was still there, but the picture itself was gone. Standing there in that empty house, she finally realized that this wasn't a typical argument. I was actually walking away. Miriam found me a week later. I had just finished work and was walking out of the office into the dark Chicago evening. My shoulder was feeling better, but it was still weak, making my gait slightly off. Her car was parked conspicuously at the curb. She rolled down the window. She was sitting in the driver's seat with her makeup as perfect as ever, looking like she had just stepped out of a meeting. "Get in," she commanded. It wasn't a request, but a command born of habit. I stayed where I was, not moving an inch. She watched me, her frown deepening until she finally opened the door and got out. "Are you planning on avoiding me forever?" she asked. "I'm not avoiding you," I said. "I just don't see any reason for us to meet." "Edward," she said, lowering her voice. "We're married." She had said those words many times over the years. In the past, I would have instinctively backed down upon hearing that. This time, I didn't budge. "You came all this way to find me. What do you want to talk about?" I asked. She studied me as if she were evaluating my resolve. "Let's just be honest with each other," she said. "Let's put everything on the table." I nodded. Phoenix. It was a quiet cafe nearby. Once we sat down, down. The tension between us was suffocating. She ordered a coffee while I just asked for a glass of water. She waited for the server to leave before speaking. Your behavior lately has been completely irrational. Not coming home and refusing to talk is only making things more difficult. I listened without interrupting. Regarding your accident, I admit I didn't come to the hospital right away, she continued. But you have to understand the situation I was in. It wasn't something I could just walk away from. What kind of situation? I asked. She hesitated. A business dinner. With who? I pressed. Her eyes flickered away for a moment. Joey Reynolds. You know him? I nodded. He was the one handling the client that night, and I needed him to coordinate everything, she added. It's not what you're thinking. The moment the words left her mouth, I understood everything. I didn't just understand her excuse. I understood her priorities. The first person she felt she had to justify was Joey, not herself. So you think I should be understanding? I asked. She grew impatient. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? I looked her in the eye. Are you sitting here today to tell me that your choice that night was perfectly reasonable? She was silent for a few seconds. I just don't want you to take things to such an extreme. The way she used the word extreme so casually was almost laughable to me. The night I was hospitalized, when you got that call and hung up, I said, did you even hesitate for a second? She didn't answer right away. After you hung up, did you even stop to consider what might be happening to me? I asked again. She pressed her lips together tightly. Edward, she finally said, there's no point in dwelling on this now. In that single moment, something inside me finally snapped. It didn't hurt. I just felt a sudden, cold clarity. Just answer me one thing, I said. She looked at me. If Joey Reynolds had been the one calling you that night, would you have gone to him? Her expression hardened. Are you actually comparing yourself to him? Yes, I said. That's exactly what I'm doing. She was clearly annoyed. He's a business associate. It's a completely different dynamic. Besides, you didn't even specify how serious your situation was. I allowed a soft laugh. So in your mind, because he was standing right there, he was more important than I was. Don't twist my words, she said, her voice turning cold. I've never played favorites. Looking at her, those words sounded completely foreign. In all our years of marriage, she had almost never taken my side. It wasn't that she ignored me on purpose. She just never considered a choice that needed to be made. When have you ever actually stood by me? I asked. She was speechless. It was a simple question, asked without anger or accusation, yet she had no answer for it. Her coffee had gone cold on the table, untouched. I waited a few more seconds, but she remained silent. At that moment, the last bit of hope I had finally vanished. Understand now, I said. She looked up. Understand what? You didn't come here to apologize today. She frowned. Then what do you think I'm doing here? You're here to see if I'm still willing to play along with your rules, I said. Her face darkened instantly. You make me sound so selfish. I didn't bother arguing. Once some things are said, anything else is just redundant. I stood up and pushed my chair back into place. We should separate, I said. She looked up sharply. What did you say? I repeated, I think we should live apart for a while. Her grip on her coffee cup tightened. Do you even realize what you're saying? I know exactly what I'm saying, I replied. You're gonna end a marriage over this? Her voice finally betrayed some actual emotion. It's not just about this one thing, I said. It's about everything. She stood up as well, her voice a forced whisper. Just calm down. I'm calm, I told her. It was the truth. I wasn't angry or acting on impulse. I was just exhausted. You're still recovering from an injury. You aren't thinking clearly. We can talk when you're feeling better. There's no point, I said. For the first time, a look of panic crossed her face. You can't do this. You're just trying to run away. I just looked at her. She rarely ever lost her composure like this. I'm not running away, I said. I'm ending this. As soon as the words were out, she went rigid. Her lips moved as if she wanted to say something, but nothing came out. I grabbed my coat and turned toward the door. Just as I reached for the handle, I heard her call my name from behind me. Her voice wasn't loud, but it had an urgency to it that I had never heard before. I didn't look back. As I walked out of the cafe, the cold night wind hit my face and my shoulder throbbed. But I knew that wasn't the real source of the pain. I was finally awake. After leaving the cafe that day, I didn't answer any more of Miriam's calls. I wasn't trying to ignore her. I just didn't see the point in talking anymore. I put my phone on silent and went back to the hotel. The room was silent. Outside, the city lights glowed all night, but I slept soundly for the first time in years. I went to work the next morning as usual. My shoulder was mostly healed, and I had regained my full range of motion. It was still a bit sore at times. The doctor had told me to take it easy, but I didn't take any more time off. Working helped me keep my mind clear. On the third night, Miriam showed up at the hotel. The front desk called to say a woman was there to see me. I gave them the okay to send her up. I was going over some paperwork when the doorbell rang. She was standing at the door, but she wasn't wearing her usual sharp high heels. Her coat was a much softer style, and her hair wasn't perfectly styled. She looked far more approachable than she usually did. This was the first time I had ever seen her look like this. Can I come in? She asked. I stepped aside to let her in. She stood near the entryway, her eyes scanning the small room. It was small but tidy. Have you been staying here the whole time? She asked. For now, I said. She nodded, as if trying to process the reality of it. I brought you some food, she said. She set the bag on the table. Your shoulder is still healing. You shouldn't be living on takeout. I didn't move. She noticed, and her hand faltered for a second. I've cleared some things on my schedule, she said. I can be home earlier for the next few days. It was her usual way of dealing with things. The moment she felt things were slipping out of her control, she would adjust her own pace and try to force everything back onto her preferred track. Don't bother, I said. She looked up at me, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. Are you still angry? I'm not angry, I told her. She took a step closer, her voice softening. Then why won't you come home? I didn't answer right away. We've been married for years. Every couple has their issues, she continued. Acting like this is only going to make things worse for both of us. She spoke carefully, trying to remain measured. She was trying to frame herself as the rational one in the situation, but she didn't realize that I was no longer interested in playing that game. You're only doing this because you've decided that I'm supposed to forgive you, I said. She was taken aback. That's not what I meant, she said quickly. I just think there's still a chance for us to fix things. You think so? I repeated. She was silent for a moment before trying a different approach. I know you've been feeling neglected lately. That was the first time she had ever used a word like that. She walked over to me and reached out as if to touch my shoulder, but her hand stopped in midair. Edward, I'll change, she said with genuine earnestness. If this had been a year ago, I might have believed her. Now I just felt tired. Do you even know what it is you need to change? I asked. She opened her mouth, but had no answer. It isn't that you don't have enough time, I continued. It's that you give all your time to the people you consider more important than me. Her expression faltered for a second. I've already handled the situation with Joey Reynolds, she said. I've made it clear to him that our relationship will be strictly professional from now on. That's your business, I said. She frowned. Is that not enough? It isn't for you to decide what's enough, I replied. There was finally a hint of desperation in her voice. Then what is it that you want? I looked at her. She truly didn't understand. She had never been one to consider anyone else's feelings but her own. I don't want anything, I said. She stood there completely stunned. You're just avoiding the problem, she said. I'm not avoiding anything, I told her. This is over. Her breathing became ragged. Don't be so dramatic. You aren't in a good place right now, and you're going to make a decision you'll regret later. I didn't respond. She stood there for a moment before suddenly turning to unpack the containers of food she had brought. She set them out on the table with clumsy movements. Just eat something. You've lost weight. Her voice was low, carrying a note of desperation that she probably wasn't even aware of. I still didn't move. Edward, she finally snapped. Can you please stop doing this? Doing what? I asked. This silence, this lack of response, she said. It's worse than if we were screaming at each other. I looked at her. She was so used to controlling every conversation and using logic to suppress any actual feelings. But she couldn't do it anymore. You're only acting like this because you're afraid of losing me, I said. Her eyes flickered. But before all this, you were never afraid of losing me, I continued. She was silent for a long time. I just thought you would always be there, she said, the words slipping out as if by accident. I nodded. Yes, that's exactly what you thought. She looked up at me, her eyes reddening. Then what is this now? I'm not there anymore, I said. She finally broke. You can't just erase years of our life together with a single sentence. I'm not erasing anything, I told her. I've just moved on. She stood there staring at me, as if she were seeing me for the very first time. She didn't stay that night. You're going to regret this, she said as she left, but there was no conviction in her voice. The room went silent again as the door closed. I sat on the edge of the bed, my shoulders still aching. I knew I didn't have any expectations left, and she still didn't realize that this was far from being over. Miriam only truly began to panic after I served her with the legal separation papers. It wasn't a divorce yet, just a formal separation. I had my lawyer send them to her through the proper channels. The terms were simple. We would maintain separate finances for the next 6 months. All property currently in our individual names would remain as is with no disputes. There wasn't a single emotional word in the document. It was strictly business. For once, she didn't immediately reject the proposal. She didn't come to see me that night, but the next morning, her car was parked outside my office building. She wasn't waiting for me. She was waiting for Joey Reynolds. I found out later that they had a long conversation in the parking garage. Miriam usually hated bringing personal issues into the office, but that day, she even went as far as to push back a meeting. Did you know he was going to leave? She asked Joey. He was taken aback for a second, but quickly regained his composure. I just thought your communication hadn't been great lately, he said, choosing his words carefully. You were the one telling me to give him time, she said, staring at him. I gave him time, and now he's gone. Joey was silent for a moment before speaking. Some people just aren't a good fit for the person you've become. Those words hit her hard. What is that supposed to mean? She asked. At your level, you need someone who's always on your wavelength, not a partner who lets their feelings get in the way of everything. He spoke plainly. She didn't argue because that was the exact same standard she had used to judge me for years. From that day on, her attitude toward Joey Reynolds began to change. There was a new sense of urgency in her interactions with him. She was looking for an explanation, for some kind of proof that she hadn't made a mistake. But Joey sensed the shift in the air and began to pull back. The calls became less frequent, and he became more guarded. He stopped staying late with with her at the office and no longer bothered to check in on how she was feeling like he used to. Every time she asked him out to dinner, he had an excuse to decline. Once, twice, then a third time. Miriam finally realized the dynamic between them had shifted. "Are you avoiding me?" she finally asked him. Joey just laughed. "Of course not. Then why aren't you answering my calls?" "I've just been slammed lately," he said. Those were the same words she had used on me 1,000 times. Hearing them from someone else stung her more than she cared to admit. She began to feel a sense of unease, not because of me, but because of a sudden realization. She hadn't just lost a husband who waited for her at home. She had lost someone she thought she could always control. Joey's true intentions finally came to light after a routine project meeting. When the meeting was over, she asked him to stay behind. "Do you find me annoying now?" she asked bluntly. He paused, not immediately denying it. "Your emotional state hasn't been great lately, and I'm not really equipped to handle that." Her heart sank when she heard him say that. "That's not what you used to say," she said, looking at him. "That was then," he replied dismissively. "Things are different now." She stared at him, finally realizing that Joey Reynolds had never been interested in her as a person. He was only interested in her position, her resources, and the value she could provide him at the time. As soon as she became a liability, he chose to walk away. She went back to her car and sat there for a long time. She didn't go back to the office or to the apartment that day. For the first time in her life, she had no idea where she was supposed to go. Meanwhile, I was finishing up my last few projects at work. Following the separation, I had begun the process of handing over my responsibilities. I wasn't quitting, just trying to minimize any unnecessary complications. My coworkers asked if I was transferring to a different department. I told them I wasn't for now, and they didn't press the issue. I stopped working late, and I stopped waiting for anyone to come home. My life had suddenly become very simple. Miriam found me again on a rainy night in Chicago without any warning. I had just finished work and was about to start my car when I saw her standing on the sidewalk. She didn't have an umbrella, and her clothes were half soaked from the rain. My first instinct was to roll up the window, but I stopped myself. She walked over and tapped on the glass. I opened the door and stepped out. "What are you doing here?" I asked. Her makeup was ruined, and her eyes were bloodshot, though not from crying. She just looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. "I need to talk to you," she said. "We've already talked," I replied. "This is different," she insisted. I just looked at her, saying nothing. She took a deep breath and said, "Joey Reynolds is being transferred." I nodded. "I see. Aren't you going to ask why?" she asked, her eyes fixed on me. "That's between you and him," I said. She looked completely lost. "He doesn't want to be involved anymore. He said it would be bad for his career." I still said nothing. "Do you really not feel anything at all?" Her voice was trembling. "I do," I said. A flicker of hope appeared in her eyes. "I think it's perfectly normal," I added. That flicker of hope vanished instantly. "How can you be so cold?" she asked, nearly losing her composure. "You didn't used to be like this." "Neither did you," I said. Those words finally silenced her. The rain began to fall harder, and she just stood there in the downpour. It was as if she finally understood that some things can't be fixed once they're broken. "Have I really lost you?" she asked softly. I didn't answer. It wasn't because I wanted to be cruel, but because the question itself was meaningless now. She let out a dry, awkward laugh. "I guess I only thought I had someone by my side when it was convenient for me." I opened my car door. "It's pouring. You should go home." She didn't move. "Edward," she called out, "if I could start over, would you still be there for me?" I looked at her. The fear and regret in her eyes were real, but none of it mattered anymore. "You don't need me there anymore," I said. She stood in the rain and didn't say another word. I got in the car and watched her figure shrink in the rearview mirror as I drove away. That night, she sat alone in her car, scrolling through her contacts. She finally realized that she didn't have a single person she could call without hesitating. I went back to my quiet apartment, turned off the lights, and let the world fade away. I knew she had lost more than just me, but that was no longer my concern. On the surface, the days following Miriam's attempts to win me back were quiet. It wasn't that she had given up, but rather that she was being extremely cautious. She stopped showing up at my office unannounced and stopped calling me incessantly late at night. She had changed her approach, carefully testing the boundaries between us. The first thing that changed was her tone of voice. She used to just tell people what to do and expect them to follow through. Now, she would ask if I was busy at work. She would ask how my shoulder was healing. Her questions were neutral, devoid of any anger or accusation. She sounded like an acquaintance just checking in. My responses were brief, sometimes just a single word. She didn't push for more. A few days later, she sent me a text. She said she had finished organizing everything at the apartment and that I could come by to pick up whatever I needed. I replied with no thanks. It took her a while to reply with a simple okay. She started bringing up the past more often, but it wasn't the usual staged romantic memories. They were small, insignificant moments that most people would have forgotten. She brought up our first business trip together when the flight was delayed and she had been furious. She remembered how I had sat with her in the airport all night. She brought up the time her stomach had been hurting so badly that I went out in the middle of the night to get her medicine. She had never mentioned those things before. Now, it felt like she was just trying to confirm that they had actually happened. I read her messages but didn't reply. I wasn't trying to be cold. It was just that those memories no longer held any meaning for me. I moved into a new place around that time. My lease was up, so I found a new apartment closer to my office in downtown Chicago. The new apartment was small but had great light. I started leaving work on time and go to the gym occasionally, slowly filling my days with a new routine. Naturally, there was no place for her in my new life. Miriam eventually spotted me near my new apartment. I was walking out of a grocery store with a bag in my hand. She was standing on the sidewalk, looking like she had been there for a while. "You moved?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. She glanced at the grocery bag and then back at me. "You seem to be doing well," she said. "I'm doing okay," I replied. That casual remark seemed to hit her hard. She had always assumed that I would be a total wreck without her, but the reality was exactly the opposite. "Let me give you a ride," she offered. "No thanks," I said. She didn't push the issue, but she walked alongside me for a while. We walked together, maintaining a polite distance. "Joey Reynolds has officially been transferred," she said suddenly. I just nodded, offering no comment. "I haven't spoken to him since," she added. "I heard," I said. She stopped and looked at me. "Do you really not care at all?" I looked at her, seeing the desperation in her eyes. "Are you waiting for me to act like I care?" I asked. She didn't answer. At that moment, I realized that she wasn't actually chasing me. She was just panicking over her loss of control. "Do you think anything I do now is just a waste of time?" she asked softly. I thought about it for a second and gave her the most honest answer I could. "It's not that it's useless. It's just that you're focusing on the wrong things." Her breath hitched. "Then what am I supposed to do?" She had never asked anyone for advice before. I looked at her and waited a moment before speaking. "You don't need to do anything else. Things have already gone too far." Her eyes began to well up. "But I'm still here." "I know," I said, nodding. "But I'm not." After that day, she became even more persistent. She would wait for me outside my office and ask if I wanted to grab dinner. She stopped making excuses or trying to reason with me. She just kept showing up. But showing up wasn't enough to fix anything. One night, she stood outside my apartment until very late. I saw her there when I went down to take out the trash. "You don't have to do this," I told her. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with exhaustion. "I just want to know if there's any way for me to get back to you." "You're already standing right here," I said. "I'm just not moving toward you anymore." Those words finally silenced her. In the weeks that followed, Joey Reynolds completely disappeared from her life. After his transfer, he quickly changed his number and cut all ties with her social circle. Miriam tried to reach out to him once, but he never responded. It was then that she finally understood. Some relationships are just cut off the moment they lose their utility. I was the only person she was still trying to hold on to, and I was the one person she couldn't reach. She started showing up more often, but I was always busy. I wasn't busy with work, I was just busy living my own life. I had my own plans and no longer made any effort to clear my schedule for her. She eventually realized that no matter when she showed up, I always had somewhere else to be. "Are you avoiding me on purpose?" she finally asked. "No," I said. "I'm just not going to change my plans for you anymore." That was even harsher than a flat-out rejection. She stood there looking completely defeated. "So you really can live without me?" "I can," I said without a moment's hesitation. She didn't follow me that day. She just stood there and watched me walk away, and I didn't look back once. I knew she finally understood that this wasn't just another fight. This was the end, and it was finally here. The last time I saw Miriam Sullivan was on a Tuesday afternoon. She had messaged me saying she had some documents for the separation that I needed to sign in person. She said it was regarding the final arrangements for our separation. Her message was strictly professional with no hint of any actual fear. I didn't refuse her. We met at a quiet cafe near my lawyer's office. It was a private spot, perfect for a conversation like this. She was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window with a stack of papers on the table. "You're here," she said, standing up. Yeah, I sat down across from her. She thanked the server politely and paid for her. Her movement controlled and graceful. Everything felt both familiar and incredibly strange at the same time. She pushed the documents toward me. "These are the sections that need your signature. Just let me know if everything looks right." I scanned the papers. Everything was straightforward, with no hidden clauses or surprises buried in the file. That actually surprised me a little. "You were very thorough this time," I said. "I don't want to make any more mistakes," she replied. I nodded and signed papers. I didn't feel a thing as the pen hit the paper. She watched me finish signing and tuck the papers away, but she didn't get up to leave. The cafe was silent. The only sound was the low hum of the espresso machine. "Edward," she said suddenly. I looked up at her. "This is the last time we're going to see each other like this," she said. It wasn't a question, just a fact. "I know," I replied. She was silent for a moment, as if she were searching for the right words. "What are you going to do now?" She had never asked me about my plans before. "Just live my life," I said. She managed a weak smile. "You become a man of a few words. There's not much left to say," I replied. She nodded, but didn't say anything else. After a while, she asked, "Do you think you'll regret this?" It was a question she had clearly been holding on to for a long time. I didn't answer right away. Not because I wasn't sure, but because I wanted to make sure I meant what I was about to say. No, I said. Her fingers curled slightly. Not even if you end up alone, she pressed. I'm already alone, I said, and I've gotten pretty good at it. She looked at me, a look of utter helplessness in her eyes. I always thought you couldn't live without me. I used to think that too, I said. That finally silenced her for good. She looked down at the table, her eyes fixed on the wood grain, but seeing nothing at all. You know, I finally realized that I didn't lose you because you stopped loving me. I said nothing. It was because I never actually knew how to be a partner to someone, she continued. Her voice was low and exhausted, but she wasn't crying. I always assumed I could just put things off, and that you would always be there waiting. But I forgot that people aren't corporate projects, she said. I didn't argue. She was right, but she had realized it far too late. If we could go back, she said, looking up at me, would you still choose me? She spoke slowly, as if she were giving herself one final chance. I just looked at her. The woman who had once been the center of my entire world was now just a stranger sitting across from me. She was calm, but entirely unfamiliar. I don't know, I said. It was the truth. And what about now? She asked. Now, the choice has already been made, I said. She closed her eyes, and for a moment, she seemed to finally accept it. Go ahead, she said. I won't take up any more of your time. I stood up and pushed my chair back. She stood up as well, but she didn't follow me to the door. I paused at the door. Miriam, I said. She looked up at me. You don't have to keep trying, I told her. It's not because you aren't good enough. I saw her swallow hard. It's just that I finished that journey, I added. She didn't say anything else. I walked out of the building. The hallway was bright, and sunlight was streaming in through the windows. I walked away, one step at a time, and I didn't look back. Behind me, she remained exactly where she was. This time, she didn't come after me. We didn't see each other for a long time after that. The paperwork was finalized without any arguments or drama. I made some changes at work, and my life became much simpler and clearer. I still think about her sometimes, but there are no feelings attached to the memories. It's like looking at an old file that's been moved to the archives. Some people show up right when they're supposed to, and others stay far too long. But I finally don't have to spend my life waiting around for anyone. What truly breaks a person isn't a missed call. It's the realization of your own profound loneliness that you hear in the long, empty silence that follows. In a relationship like this, you don't lose to the other person. You lose to their arrogance, their assumption that you'll always be there waiting for them. People often treat relationships like a contract they can just file away and pick up whenever they have something to do. They forget that the human heart has an expiration date. Once you've had enough disappointment, the coldness you feel isn't you being dramatic. It's you finally waking up. Leaving someone who doesn't value you isn't running away. It's just smart emotional management. You have to realize that your kindness is valuable. You shouldn't waste it on someone who treats you like an optional partner. When the person who is always there finally walks away, it isn't just a breakup. It's a long, overdue return to who they were always supposed to be. Sometimes you have to learn how to be strong on your own before you can find someone who actually wants to put your name at the very top of their emergency contact list.